So I just want to, as I've told people, I've gotten to know you over the last few years. You're doing a lot of traveling. You travel, you crisscross the nation constantly speaking to Americans to educate them how important it is to get involved in the local level. And I'm just wondering, what is your perception of the public's level of engagement, at the local level, since you've started, really trying to wake people up?
Yeah, I do think that the public's engagement is much stronger than it used to be, because I do think that there is a real sense from the American, the American sentiment, I call it, this attitude or this sentiment, the feeling that people have across the country that something is really wrong, right? There's a great level of distrust and uncertainty. There's also a feeling of fear, I think, in the society today, and so what those emotions cause is they cause people to act differently. Now, in some cases, some people will act in a way that that you don't want them to act, which is they'll sort of close in on their own lives, and they'll go and worry about their own little world, and they won't get involved in sort of what I would call extracurricular activities as citizens of this great country. But I have seen many people, more than I would have thought of, as I go around the country, and I do try to get at the grassroots level. I don't try to go and do too many of these sort of big muckety muck events and stuff. I really like to go and talk to small groups. Go into bars, cafes. We do big events too, but even when we do big events, I try to go around and talk to people. People are definitely getting more engaged. The one thing that I would say that has caused that, and I actually think that women in this country, particularly moms in this country, have sort of turned that heat up a little bit, because with the I call it kind of the assault on the future, which is really the assault on our children and grandchildren of this country. So teenagers, maybe young adults, but certainly teenagers, and then secondary and elementary level kids. There's been such an assault on them through social media, through our education system. And so what that is causing is it's causing people to sort of change their attitude about their children, and we're not just letting them kind of go off and do their own thing these days. So moms have gotten more involved, and the reason why I say moms, because I think most of our country, and I don't have the stats for it, but I think most of our country with families are single family homes, and it's, of course, the mom is the one that's raising the child. So I think that if there's one thing that has really caused Americans to get involved in their communities, it's been this assault on children, and I think it's been principally by women. Now, that said, there are other people that I have seen over the past year get more involved in communities, and that's because, frankly, communities are being destroyed because there's no economy to support them. So it's, to support these communities. So, when factories shut down, when the economy turns to a more of a tech-based economy, and you don't have the other types of economies that we would have with home building. I mean, even home building is down these days because of the cost of everything, right? So more people are starting to get involved. I would say, though, that, and yesterday's is an interesting example of that. So, because everything that I just said was out of one side of my mouth, where I said more and more people are getting involved. The other side of my mouth is that as I look at the results of the off-cycle year elections, right? We just had a bunch of elections, I think, in at least 11 states, at least 11. Some were gubernatorial elections, others were just state legislatures, and some were just city councils and such. The average turnout for voting yesterday was less than 40%. So for people who can vote and are registered to vote, less than 40% on average, and it's probably closer to 35%. So less than 40%, let's say, turned out to vote. So what is that telling us? That's telling us that there's there's still a lot of people that are just not what I call, stepping up and standing up for their communities by voting. I mean, if there's one thing that makes us all equal, at least one day a year or one day every other year, is our vote. And it's a privilege, it's a right, it's a responsibility, and it's a privilege. So for anybody that gets out there and complains about what Washington, D.C. is doing, or what Tallahassee, the state capital in Florida, or what our local city council or our local parish council is doing here in Florida, and if they don't vote, then they really don't have, a right to complain. I mean, I guess they have a right because they have a right to speak freely, but I'm not going to listen to them, because my
Right.
first question to people these days now, especially as we get ready to roll into 2024 elections, which are really vital, they're so important. But as I talk to people and they're complaining to me or they're griping about some issue that in our government, I'm going to ask them, well, where do you live, right? And they'll tell me, and I'll say, well, have you voted? Did you vote? Do you vote? And if they kind of go, well, I have, or I really don't get involved. Or if I get an inclination that they haven't voted or they don't vote, I'm going to ask them why, and then I'm going to tell them, when you want to complain to me, come back and complain to me after you have voted, right? And you have participated as a citizen in something, as you well know, Simone, from your legal scholar days, being a trained lawyer, we have a constitutional republic, and it is truly a we the people, functioning government. It's not supposed to be at the federal level. It's not supposed to be necessarily at the state level. It's supposed to be a citizen-run government, and the only way that you actually run the government is by participating in it, and the most important way to participate is by voting. So, that's a long answer to your question about, what do I see when I go around the country? What I see is I see a lot more people getting involved, but I now want to really hone in on getting people to go and vote. I mean, now people will go, well, the votes don't count. Our system is rigged. And there's a lot to be said about that. There's clearly a lot to be said about that. So,
you said in your recent op-ed in the Western Journal, you said that you didn't actually think the Republicans were going to win in 24. Is part of that because of this lack of turnout, or?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of things, Simone, and a couple of things. Number one, I can see a scenario where we don't have an election. I can see that. I can play that out in my head by either some declaration of a national emergency, or frankly, we go to a much greater war, as you and I have gone back and forth on with the war in the Middle East, specifically honing in on Israel. So I can see that. That's one. So I can see a scenario where that could potentially happen. Now, I'm not saying it's going to, but let's say if we do have an election, let's say we roll into 2024, we roll into November, we're going to go finish the primaries in the spring and conventions in the summer, and we go into the dead sprint towards November with the two principal parties, the Republican and the Democrat, which is really the conservative party now and the Socialist Party, because it's the Democrat Party doesn't exist. The Republican Party is broken. You may be registered as a Republican, you may be registered as a Democrat, but you're really, if you're a strong participant in the government and in the country, you're probably a strong conservative. And on the other side, in what we're seeing people who are really strong in terms of their socialist leanings, right? That's really kind of the direction of the Democrat Party. So what I see as an outcome in 2024 is that if we are standing, and I think it's 5 November, I think that's the date, that's the Tuesday in November. So if on the 6th of November, which is the day after, the Wednesday after the presidential election on the 5th, if we're having a conversation like I'm having with you right now, and it's about voter turnout, and voter turnout on 5 November 2024 is less than 70%. So mark my words, if it's less than 70%, And more than likely it will be if the trends, if the historic trends stay the same, it will be less than 70%. Then a Republican is probably not going to win. And that Republican should be, by all rights, Donald Trump. But if it's less than 70%, that means that people who are registered to vote in this country, all parties, less than 70% will actually turn out to vote. That means 30%, a third of the country, will not vote. And they'll just kind of go, well, I'm registered, but I don't play that politics stuff, right? I mean, when people have that attitude, that's dangerous for a constitutional republic, that is essentially an experiment in democracy. So if it's less than 70%, then the nation is at risk to become a socialist nation. If people hear me on this podcast and hear one thing from me on this podcast, it is to go register to vote and go and vote. And I mean, and vote. And if your state, and I have the roll-ups being given to me here later today, but if your state has mail-in ballots, and you want to vote by mail-in ballots, I mean, those are state laws. I don't like it. I don't like mail-in balloting. I think it's filled with fraud. I think that we should have, one-day voting. We should have ID cards. We should, validate signatures, the whole thing. But if we have mail-in ballots in some states, which we do, then we got to participate in that. And we can't just hope that everybody or enough people show up on voting day. And this is where the party apparatus comes in, right? The GOP and the DNC. So the parties have to really be much stronger, smarter. I think the GOP as a party, especially the Republican National Committee, I think is totally broken. I actually think it's rudderless and leaderless. And I think that Ronna McDaniel, should resign. She actually should resign by the end of the day today. So
by the end of today, exactly. I like that. Here. Second that motion.
Yeah, because these leaders. So one other point on that: the leaders. She matters because she runs the state GOP chairs. Every state has a GOP chair, has a Republican chair of that state, and the same with the Democrats. And they are really, they're supposed to be doing two things. They have two real responsibilities. One is to get more people to register for their party. And the second responsibility is to get people out to vote. So, implied in that is you have to tell people that there's a vote coming up, that there's an off-cycle vote or there's a regular, there's a November vote, right? So that's just implied. But you have to get people to register and then you have to get people to vote. Those are your two responsibilities. If we have less than 40% nationwide right now, which is what we have, mark my words, and then every single one of those GOP chairs in those states, they ought to be fired. We have to have people who understand what their responsibilities are and put the energy into getting people to vote. I mean, we're talking about 60% of registered Republicans didn't vote in these states yesterday. That's so outrageous, and it kills me because I sacrificed, and people have sacrificed their lives to protect the rights that we have. I sacrificed 3.5 decades of my life so people could be lazy, but could also vote. You have a right to be lazy if you want, but when it's time to vote, don't be lazy. Get your ass off the couch and go vote.
Now, with America's Future, do you guys help? If people go to America's Future's website, are they able to kind of sign up and figure out, okay, how do I get involved at my local level? Is that something that America's Future does, helps plug people in your local area?
Well, so America's Future, I use that for a different purpose. That's a 501c3. It's probably the oldest 501c3 in the country. It started in 1946. And there was no such thing as 501c3s at the time. So it is a nonprofit. What my goal for that one is, I'm chairman of that one, and I've been at it for about almost 3 years now. It was dormant for like 10, 15 years almost. What my project is on that, because we're not involved in election integrity issues. We talk about, we have newsletters and we talk about our constitutional rights and our principles and our values. But the major project that I'm involved in right now, that we have our entire team involved in, is Project Protect and Defend Children. I am so angry and upset about the child trafficking problem that we have in our country. So that's where America's future is focused right now, and we are on a tear to go through all 50 states to do training, and we do training on how to spot and assess, work with local law enforcement, and also how to change laws. We have a bunch of laws that we're already in the process of getting changed in various states around the country, to include getting behind and supporting Governor DeSantis' signature on a death penalty bill for child traffickers, which I'm fine with. So
Excellent.
that's America's future. On other organizations that I support, like what's called precinctstrategy.com. That's Steve Stern. You go to precinctstrategy.com, or you go to Audit the Vote, whatever state you are. So Audit the Vote PA, Audit the Vote New York, Audit the Vote Georgia. Those are organizations that are involved in being very active to get people out at the local level. I use the phrase local action equals a national impact. And I want to get people involved at their local level. Let guys like me, let people like you who have a national audience and have a platform to be able to talk to lots of people nationally and internationally. Let us worry about what's happening at Washington, D.C. Doesn't mean that I want you to stop paying attention to it. I don't. But I want you to do the things that you can do with what you have. Now I'm talking to your audience. Don't worry about what Mike Flynn is going to do. Worry about what you're going to do. Use what you have. Use it as wisely as you can at the level that you have. Use the resources that you have, but use them now. And get involved in your communities. Get involved in your churches. Get involved in the things that matter to you locally. And if you do that, it's everything from volunteering to be a poll watcher or be a precinct volunteer, or maybe you run for office, or maybe you get involved in a school board campaign. Maybe you get, I love to ask people, when was the last time you went to a city council hearing? When was the last time you went to a school board hearing? You go to a school board hearing, and in the past, you'd have nobody show up. The school board would put some rubber stamps on stuff, and they continue to have drag queen hour, right? Or critical race theory inside of elementary schools, or teaching about, gay sex to second graders. These are real things. Well, now we have more people going to these various meetings because people are concerned, like I said early on, about moms. But you have to continue to do that. We can't give up as citizens and just say, well, somebody else will show up. Somebody else will do it.
And I want to just second. This is something I champion all the time, which is you don't have to be Dr. Gold in your case. You don't have to be General Flynn. The impact you can have on the local level is enormous. There are so many specific little initiatives in Florida, for example. Now, if you send your child to a charter school or homeschooling, for example, you can get the money back and put it in a for yourself, your tax dollars back. That happened because the local grassroots group decided to make that happen. There are groups that take back the libraries, for example. Those things are within your power to do, and my goodness gracious, you have to vote.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to. So let's talk about Gold Care, because Gold Care is an alternative, and I'm not going to tell you what Gold Care is. You can describe what it is, but as I know probably more about it than the average person, but essentially what you have done, because you just hit on something that's really important to me, this idea of alternative things to do, creating an alternative universe for the things that are not being provided to us by our own government, or they're being provided to us in a way that we don't like it. And so while we try to change it through voting, we also create, because we can still be innovative in this country, we can create alternative things. Gold Care is an alternative resource for healthcare. In a big way. The idea of homeschooling, because you just kind of hit on that a little bit. Homeschooling, particularly in Florida, but I know I've looked at homeschooling across the country. Homeschooling is exploding, in terms of essentially parents, and again, it's sort of moms back to women, around the country. So we're seeing the rise of homeschooling. It's like growing by I think it's like by 5 times across the nation. In Florida, it's actually higher than that. And the numbers of homeschoolers and what they call in Florida pods, where a group of moms get together. Sometimes I've seen really effective ones where they've grabbed hold of retired teachers who come in and they support the teaching of the students, of these small group pods that they have for homeschooling. I mean, all these kinds of things matter. And that's kind of what you've done with Gold Care. Gold Care is a very effective, it's a cost effective, it's a health efficient, because it really allows people to make decisions about things that they can't do if they got to go to a hospital, or if you got to go through, some insurance program that you have. And to me,
Why are we? Yeah. I was going to say, why are we also concerned about socialism? And it's because our founding fathers knew that at the end of the day, this is all about stealing your money, stealing your labor. That's really the end of it. That's what socialism is. So one of the ways they're really stealing our money is through taxes, right? So our taxes, we're forced to pay taxes to the public, to the government school system, for example. So there's less liberty there, but you still actually have a fair amount of liberty in the healthcare space. You can choose to not pay the Kaiser, Blue Cross, United,
Right.
Health Group, etc. And by the way, those organizations are not looking out for your best interest. So I keep urging people, you have still time in certain areas where we can really retain our freedoms and also retain our money, which is essentially at the end of the day, this is all about wealth transfer, to the elites.
Yeah. Well, we're going to
In
see
general,
some of that. We're going to see some of that here. This idea about wealth transfer, and anyway, I was just thinking about what you were saying while you were saying it. You're actually, I know it says a doctor, lawyer, warrior. It should say warrior, who's a doctor and a lawyer.
Yeah. I love working with you, Dr. I was calling you Dr. General Flynn. Oh my goodness, I think I might have to flip that.
Now, General Flynn, I want to direct everybody to your Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare.
Yeah.
It's an excellent book. I bought it when it first came out. I had my sons who we homeschool them. They've had to read it as part of their curriculum last year. And now you have a new release entitled How to Fight Artificial Intelligence. And we only have just a few minutes left, but I'd love for you to explain really quick to parents watching why artificial intelligence is so dangerous, specifically when it comes to children, and just how we're seeing this technology being used over social media today that could steal a child's identity or other things that would harm children.
Yeah, it's so important. So first of all, and thank you for allowing me to talk a little bit about this. So we call it the Citizen's Guide because we wrote it for the sort of average citizens. Myself and Boone Cutler are both out of the fields of psychological operations, information warfare, intelligence, and counterintelligence planning and operations. I mean, so it's there's a lot of nuances and detail and military ease. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to create something that was understandable for the average citizen that didn't have all of our training. So that's why we call it the Citizen's Guide. The first one that we wrote that you talk about is fifth generation warfare. Fifth generation warfare is essentially what is happening around us now. It's this war of narratives, war for our minds, and definitely for our children's minds. And we talk a lot about that in here. And I think that for like kids who are certainly high school level or who are just good readers can understand this. I mean, this is actually something for young kids to be able to read as well as adults.
It's not overcomplicated.
This one is how to fight. So the subtitle is How to Fight Artificial Intelligence, How to Fight AI. And essentially what we are being bombarded by is we're being bombarded by a lot of information, and it's not coming from TV anymore. It's coming from, right now it's coming from a device like this, right? A phone or computers for the most part, but kids are now, being wired up with on their wrists or certainly their phones, and there's all kinds of social media and the pressure of social media and the psychological effect, the emotional effect, the societal and cultural effect that is actually real. These have been studied, and we provide some of that information in there. There are adversaries on the in the world of electronics, right? In the sort of the Ethernet that exists around us, right? there are adversaries, and those adversaries could be in the form of people who are into pornography, people who are into child trafficking, people who are into drug selling and smuggling. Adversaries like China. We talk a lot about some of the social media platforms. We talk about TikTok in there. We talk about Instagram and some of the effects that can be had if you're trying to be part of something. We talk about the idea of avatars and the creation of avatars and the use of avatars and the progression of avatars being to the point where they are so real now. It's not just some cartoonish looking thing. It could actually be a real person. It could actually be somebody like me standing here talking to you today, and you don't know whether it's me talking or whether it's an avatar talking, because they're so real. So the believability, the advent of what they call mis and disinformation. Well, we have a government. We have a government that has extraordinary capabilities for all these things that I talk about. And when we have adversarial governments like Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, and other nations who don't have our best interests at mind, then this pressure, particularly on children, because adults will usually have their ways that they learn, and they know what they want, and they see what they want, and they, for the most part, that's not universal. That is definitely not universal. But where the biggest and greatest effect will always be, it's on the youngest children, and then those children being in elementary, secondary, and in high school, that are constantly being bombarded with this world of information that you don't know what they're seeing on a daily basis. So it's more than just saying, I'm going to make sure that the channel doesn't go to the pornography channel or whatever, right, on my kid's phone. It's far more than that, because there's so many other ways that they're exploiting and infiltrating, the mindset and the attitude, and like I said really at the beginning, the sentiment of America. So if somebody comes in during an election and says, that the polls say, Mike Flynn is up by 15 and it looks good for him to win, that could be a total lie. That could be a total deception. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep people from saying, well, and this is a really simple example, from going out and voting the next day, because they figured, Flynn's going to win, so it's raining, I'm not going to go vote, or it's too cold, I'm not going to go vote. It could be that simple. Or it could be there are other complex examples in this book that we provide, and they can find it on generalflynn.com. But you send me your address, and I'll send you a signed copy.
Thank you so much.
Gosh, I would never run out of things to talk with you about. There's so many things we didn't cover, which I won't even mention, because then we'll just go on for another 2 hours. It's so much fun to talk with you.
Well, I do, because you've been really pretty sharp, Simone, about and shared some things with me for your audience too. And it's really, I think it's important to mention this. But what's going on in the Middle East? And so maybe what I do is we reset, because the war in the Middle East is going to be going on for a long time, and it's not going well. It's not going well at all, and people need to understand that. Right. And I know that you have a lot of passion about it, but you also have a lot of really strategic insight into it. And so maybe I come back on here in the very, very near future, and we talk about it.
That's excellent.
We'd
love to have you back on for that.
Yep.
That's a subject that I do want to go over with you. And it's funny, you read my mind. That's what I was intimating at. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, General Flynn. It's always a pleasure and an honor. And it's an honor for our viewers to hear your thoughts, your educated opinion on a lot of things.
Great,
thank you.
Great. Warrior, doctor, lawyer.
Yeah, that's true.
All right.
And we'll change
Peace.
all of that.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for all that you're doing, and thanks for this show and getting out there to tell people what the heck's going on. It's so important. It's vital today.
Well, thank you for all you do. And also next time, we got to have you on to talk a little bit more about that financial stuff that you mentioned.
Yeah, big time. People need to, one last point, people need to read Executive Order 14067. Executive Order 14067. You can Google it, and it's the central bank digital currency. If you read it, you'll have some insight It's only a couple of pages. If you read it, signed by Biden, you'll have some insight as to the massive, massive changes that are going to occur with our financial system here in the coming weeks, actually.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you guys.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
My name is General Mike Flynn, and I want everyone to know that I stand fully behind Beverly Hills Precious Metals and its owner, Andrew Sorcini. We are facing one of the greatest periods of financial uncertainty in both American and world history, and so now is the time to organize your finances. With the advent of the BRICS pay system, we need to now seriously consider how we can take better care of ourselves and our families and start some serious decision making when it comes to our wealth. You can also ask about their newest 2-ounce coin of yours truly. It's an absolutely great gift, and I am deeply honored to be part of history, as well as helping people protect their finances, their wealth, and their investments. So visit gold.generalflynn.com. Tell them the General sent you. Thank you so very much. God bless you, and God bless America.